All right. So thank you for coming to the Climate Action and Advisory Board meeting. Appears we have a quorum and we can go ahead and get started. So first I wanted to remind people about Zoom, and any votes need to be done by a roll call. We need to make sure we have the full name of participants viewable. Is there any other rules that I'm generally forgetting, Kate?
Nope, John's gonna do the minutes today, but I think that should do it. When we get to public comment, you can write a message in the chat if you want to make a comment. Otherwise, we'll let you raise your hand and make sure we get to everybody.
Is the chat feature on? I don't see it.
It should be.
I don't see it either.
No. Well, while we're meeting, I'll see if I can make that happen.
Okay. All right. So welcome everybody. I hope we're all safe, happy, and healthy. And I'm going to go ahead, Kate, and do you want to do the introduction of Abigail?
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce everyone to Abigail, who's on the Zoom with us listening in today. Abigail is an intern working with me this summer. There she is. And she comes to us through the UNH Sustainability Institute. You may remember Courtney was our summer fellow here. This year, Abigail's working with us on sustainability recommendations for historic and older homes. This is something that has been kind of in the back of my mind because anecdotally I've heard folks say, I would love to do insert sustainability thing here, but my whole home is old or historic or in a historic district. So Abigail just graduated with a master's in architecture. So she's a great person to be digging into the actual barriers for doing sustainability to historic and older homes and looking into what are other communities doing that we might want to replicate, and ultimately come up with some guidance for what we can do in Concord to retrofit our older and historic homes to be more sustainable. So I'm really excited to have her here. She's working virtually as we all are right now, so it's a little different summer internship experience, but she's nearby, and she'll be working with me for the next probably 8 weeks or so, and she'll listen in today and then probably join us in later in the summer to share some of her findings with you all.
Great.
Yeah, that's excellent. Very much could use that help. You know, I've spoken with many residents that live in those districts that have had difficulties with the architectural style of some of their efforts, whether it be making more insulated house or adding solar panels or other efforts. And you know, keeping the historic character is definitely a town priority, and so is sustainability. And finding a balance is sometimes difficult. But I'm glad someone's going to dig into the weeds and give us a nice little report on ideas of what we can do.
Yeah, so right now Abigail's doing some interviews with various stakeholders from other communities and also property owners who've either tried to make sustainability improvements or have done other historic observations. So if you or anyone you know has gone through the process of retrofitting an older historic home with an eye to sustainability and you think they'd be a good person for Abigail to talk to, just send me an email and we'd love to reach out.
Excellent. All right, I guess we'll move on to upcoming meetings and minutes. Does anyone have any questions for Abigail before I move on? I don't see anyone raising a hand, so.
I was going to say, remember they had at the Harvey Wheeler Center, they had, you know, one of those events where they had, and I remember visiting, there was a contractor there who specialized in older home upgrades.
Was this recently?
Was that pre-you? Anyone else remember that? And that just came to mind when you said architecture and sustainability, and I didn't know if we had that person's contact
It was before I was here.
information. It may have been, but I remember it stuck out to me. I might be able to find that person's contact info. I'll look around.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, we can always take a look at the past events and see if we can find who that might be. Thanks, Peter.
Yeah. And if anyone else has, I'm sorry, if anyone else has ideas on dealing with the HTC and sustainability, feel free to email Kate and she can pass that on to Abigail. So going on to upcoming meetings, during the COVID thing, we've been kind of playing it by ear, doing meetings one-off and not having any forecast of what the meetings will be like. I think we've kind of figured out a method to meet, being on Zoom, and I'd like to go back to our meetings on Wednesdays, on the third Wednesday of each month. But I did want to talk to you about what hour of the day is best. We did it previously at 7 o'clock because most of us worked and had to travel home before we could meet in person. But now that we're all working from home, I wanted to hear your thoughts about the hour of the day, and or if Wednesdays just are bad for you routinely going forward. Does anyone have any input on meeting schedules?
So for me, it still needs to be, this 4 o'clock is challenging for me, and I could do it, but my work is still going. So 6 o'clock still works.
So later in the evening,
Or even like 5:30, but the 4 o'clock is, I just can't do that consistently.
Okay.
I'm in the same boat.
You same boat as well? All right.
Yeah, me too.
And Pam, Pam Hill? You're muted, Pam.
The BU Law School's teaching schedules are still unclear, but it's possible I'll be teaching on Wednesdays, which is often the time I teach at 6 o'clock.
And when do you think you might know that routine schedule? Do we have a couple months?
I expect pretty soon, but it could be Wednesday or Thursday, and it's probably going to be at 6. So I'll let you know as soon as I know.
Okay. All right. For our upcoming meeting on July 15th, if we were, that's a Wednesday, is that correct? Yeah. We can, Ruthie, a 4 o'clock time on the 15th of July. Do you think you'd be able to make that?
Yeah, I'll put it in now.
Okay.
I can't keep doing it. Sure.
All right. So we're gonna plan for July 15th being at 4 o'clock on a Wednesday. Pam Hill, if you hear your schedule between now and then, and it ends up being Wednesdays, we can do a doodle to find out another day of the week.
Actually, no, I thought you were looking into the long-term future. This won't begin until earliest the first week in September.
Yes,
I was thinking you were looking long-term into the next.
I am.
Yeah.
I am. So I am looking.
I'm good until at least September.
Okay. Then we'll do that for the 15th, and we'll start with an assumption of 4 o'clock. If we find that Ruthie is having trouble making that, or others, we can adjust to a different time of day. But let's start assuming 4 o'clock Wednesdays, a third Wednesday of the month. Did everyone have a chance to review the minutes that were in the packet? Does anyone have feedback on the minutes that were provided? Could we do, anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I'll make a motion.
Okay. And I'll assume one of the other ones is a second.
Second.
So let's go ahead and vote to approve the minutes of May 20th. Can I start? I'm going to go across my screen. So Mike, do you yay or nay to approve the minutes?
Approve the minutes.
Okay.
Yes.
And Jack? Jack, you
Jake.
able to, Jake?
I wasn't going to answer until you said Jake.
As you should.
Ugh.
Oh my God. All right. Thank you, Jake. Warren,
Approve.
thank you. Brian,
Approve.
Peter, and Ruthie,
Approve.
and Courtney,
Approve.
and Pam.
I didn't get a chance to read them closely, so I'll just, I
Abstain.
approve on the basis of everyone else's approvals, I guess.
All right. You can also abstain if you'd like.
Yeah, I might probably should because I read them quickly when I first got them.
All right. John,
Approve.
approve, and I approve as well. So we'll say that those are approved, and we'll get them posted. And so that is the meetings and minutes. Let's go ahead and get the next section going with an update from Kate on the second draft of the plan.
Thanks. So very exciting. We have the second draft of the plan is out. I sent it to all of you last week. This is based on extensive feedback on the first draft. So thank you for that last month. It's out right now for your feedback, of course, municipal team, and also broadly public comment. I also shared with you a link to a 7-minute intro video that is up on YouTube. That's basically me giving the high level about the plan's goals and how it all came together. So feel free to share that with, friends, neighbors, anyone who might be interested in submitting public comment. Public comments due next Monday, so there's still another week. CSEC, the other sustainability committee, met on Friday for the first time since everything's been closed down, and they discussed the plan. They're obviously a key partner in getting a lot of these actions implemented. Overall, the feedback was positive, and there's a lot of eagerness to get started on doing the work. So that was great. So where we go now is the final document will be available in early July, and we'll move forward with implementation. So definitely need your feedback today, but also if you have detailed comments, send me an email by this Friday, the 19th. And note that I am aware that there are things like Appendix X and some placeholder text. We will have it copy edited, so no need to send those minor edits along to me. Just focus on the content that's in there. So we have time today to do a round robin to get your feedback, and also so that you can hear others and share with each other. I haven't heard anything from any of you, so I assume it's all good news and it's perfect. No, I'm just kidding. But eager to hear your feedback, and we can just kind of go around the room. Brian, do you want to add anything to tee us up, or should we just get started?
No, just a reminder that this document is not the final say in everything we're going to do and not do. We've gone through a long process of picking the priorities. So if there are major things you want changed, I don't think it's going to happen at this late stage. But as we go, through this process, we'll be adding more things over the years through updates, as well as full, second versions, in years ahead. So just teeing that up for kind of giving some idea of the kind of feedback. If something that you see in one of the blueprints doesn't make sense, please let us know, and maybe we can wordsmith that implementation step or those other ideas. But that's it. So Ruthie, I offered for you to do the first recap because I know you do have to drop first. But do you have any general feedback on the plan that you want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I only have to leave by 5:30, so I have time. But
Okay.
I mean, I think I sent it to my husband at the same time that I got it, and we both had the same comment, which is, it's so dense that if you don't love this stuff, you're not going to wade through it. And I'm concerned about that, because I was like, look at this and look at this, and he's like, that's interesting. I mean, and he's into it like I am, not as I am, but he's into it. It just, it's too much. It's too heavy. I don't know if we need, or we can find a 2-page like a list, or I don't know, but it just needs something to de-densify it.
Yeah.
So,
So, you know, I'm going to hold my comments till my time. I'm not going to comment on everybody else because that wouldn't be fair.
so yeah, I mean, that's my, I mean, I think it's, you know, I think it's great. We've done so much work. I think if you read through it, you can understand what we can do. So I feel like if you're really committed, this makes a lot of sense. I'm just worried that the average, you know, citizen will look at it as like a heavy book and say, I can't do this, or I don't know where to find my thing. So
What do you, building on that, what do you think about the blueprints being a, my thing, being able to grab one of those blueprints and getting a 2-page summary of where that action is? Do you think that's a helpful tool for people to digest? If they're, say, for example, they're interested in urban canopy, they could grab that blueprint and understand what the town is doing related to trees. Is that a digestible? Oh, did you freeze? Did your video freeze?
Like it.
It looks like it. All right. Well, while her internet connection reloads, Mike, would you like to give some feedback on the plan?
Sure. Yes, just building on what Ruthie was saying, I'm just wondering, I had a similar reaction. There's 39 pages, 39 rich pages of a lot of depth and a lot of content, and maybe a, you know, an executive summary, something that people who have about 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, they might read through the architecture of 3 pages. That might be one thing, but that was a reaction. I read it again this time, and I felt I had made a great number of changes, as Kate knows, not changes, suggestions, and some of them are in there. This time I read it with one sort of overarching theme that I felt was cross-cutting through. You know, there are 5 elements and 22 actions. It's an awful lot of stuff there. But what runs through it, in my mind's eye, is the area that the plan speaks to around financing mechanisms. And it does in each of them say explore financing mechanisms. But I think that having much more delineation, much more specificity, and many more options would make that far more powerful, because we're going to get to the point when we do implementation that every one of those actions is the first question that either department heads are going to have, or anyone who ultimately is accountable, is the financing side of it. And we don't have to answer that today, but I think that over time, the board looking at that could provide you know, more depth in the plan, and also more in terms of a timeline, that instead of exploring it, it would be language that would be devoted around within 2 years, or by 2022, you know, the town will identify 2 to 3 mechanisms for that financing. And more than likely, it would be a need to engage, at least in my mind's eye, would need to engage the municipal light plan, because I think a good deal of the mechanisms that we might ultimately conclude are going to be nested there. So that's the overarching theme I had. And other than that, I'm very optimistic about the plan. It's bold.
Great. Ruthie, you got
Sorry.
dropped. That's all
my
right.
computer died. I think my computer is done with Zoom.
So
Yeah. Yeah,
you
I said-
had feedback about how dense it was, and I had asked if you felt the if you're interested in trees, tearing off the blueprint about trees, does that give you a good summary of your topic you're interested in? Mike followed up after you to say that some kind of executive summary is needed. What's your thoughts on those kind of ideas?
Right. So I was hoping to not do an executive summary in that I feel like that's actually too thin. I like the blueprints. Like if it was a perforated thing and you took the blueprints and you're like, oh, this is my thing, and I could take this more detailed but not heavy tome. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have an executive summary, but I wouldn't want that to be what everybody reads, because I think that's not enough to get you going.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I like the perforated blueprints idea.
yeah, right. Take it with me. This is my thing.
All right, so next on my screen is Jack. And I'm going to say Jack, so he answers me. So Jack, what was your thoughts on?
You're still wrong.
You're still saying Jack.
Oh,
It's
Jake.
Jake. No worries, Brian.
No. I'm
We
mentally
realize it
deranged
cannot
here.
be changed now.
You can.
It's imprinted.
It is. I'm gonna.
Jake, I think you're mute.
Maybe just call him Mr. Swenson, and then you never have
There
to.
you go.
Yes, there we
That's a
go.
good idea.
That's the solution.
You can
Rick.
start
Mr.
calling me
Swenson.
Neo. I will keep it brief. I didn't get a chance to really dig into this deep enough to provide major feedback today. I will agree that I think the points that Ruthie and Mike brought up in terms of having a digestible version of this that the community, folks in the general community can really get a good understanding of kind of where we are, what we've identified as priority actions, and how those play out will be really impactful and helpful in getting, building awareness of the plan, because those folks aren't going to take the time to read it. And I noticed a few things from a formatting and just some of the indicators that I'll provide feedback on, but I think it's looking really great. I realize it is dense, and so I think having those elements, and maybe there's more than one that we develop over time to provide insight for folks who aren't going to be able to spend the time, but can get them interested in it overall, or figure out, okay, here's where I want to go. I want to learn more about energy or buildings or whatever, and I can dig in there, but I'm not going to focus on anything else. So that would be my only feedback today, and I'll send feedback before the deadline.
Okay.
Thanks.
Wonderful. Next on my screen is Warren. Warren, what was your thoughts on the current plan?
Yep, I haven't had time to read it all in depth. I think it's looking real good, though. It looks very professional. It's dense, but it's attractive. There's lots of good stuff in there. I think maybe instead of an executive summary or some standalone piece, maybe what it needs is a roadmap. Some document that says, this is picking up on what Jake was just saying, if you're interested in X, you find it here in the report. If you want to get a sense of the overview of what we're suggesting in terms of all the priority actions, is here. I don't know if that's the right approach, but something brief that helps guide people through the document. There were a couple of things that I'll send in writing. The one section that I'm still a little disappointed in, that I hope you could strengthen, is the next step section. In fact, the next step section now is even briefer than before, it seems. And it would be nice to make it clear that we realize there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, in particular in terms of figuring out the costs and benefits of these different financial costs and financial benefits of the different steps, identifying the priority and trade-offs among them. Maybe it's in there somewhere, but I couldn't find it.
Okay. Any other comments?
That's it.
All right. I like your idea, and I'd like to build on that a little. For the table of contents page doesn't have a lot of graphics on it. Maybe putting electricity and then a page number, and then like a solar panel and a page number, and putting a tree and a page number to get people to jump to those blueprints might be a good way to do that idea of letting people jump ahead to what they're interested in. Just there, that's my thought. Brian, do you have any feedback you'd like to give?
Yeah, a couple. First, I'd like to echo Warren's comments about one thing I like in each section is that there's, what's the wording? Actions to date. So it would be a nice follow on, even in each section, is like potential future actions or something that links us to something specific going forward, because it does, in a sense, end in a fizzle with the next step section. I would agree with that. Couple comments. One, in general, I like that the measure indicators of success generally have like a carbon emissions, target, so you can see where we are, you can see where we're going, and then how we're getting there with the metrics below. The energy one oddly doesn't have that, where if we're going to 100% carbon free, then it should be from wherever we are now to 0, so the math should be easy. But for consistency, we're missing carbon emissions target on energy. On natural resources, I don't know, this is a hard thing to do, but I'd love to see a comparable, from a change in trees or something, but what's the carbon impact, the emissions impact of different management of our natural resources in town? I'm just flipping through, looking at my sticky notes here. I think I had one more. I think I'll stop there.
Excellent.
To build maybe, can we just comment along the way, Brian, or shall we just?
Yeah, I mean, I've been doing it, so I should allow others. Mike, any ideas related to Brian's comment?
Yeah, I thought what Brian was saying, particularly in terms of the greenhouse gas reduction, it's also noticeable in the mobility area, like how many cars and fleets and things like that. So connecting the carbon reduction to the action, I think would strengthen the plan. But thank you for raising that, Brian. It's good insight.
Okay, good. Peter, what is your feedback on reading the plan? You're still muted. You got all fancy with the applause, and now you're stuck with the mute. All right, I am going to move on to Courtney and come back to you, Peter. Courtney, what is your feedback on the plan?
Oh, I apologize. I didn't get to dig into it either.
Oh, it's very hard to hear you.
Oh. Okay.
There you go.
Is that better?
Yep.
Better.
I didn't get to dig into it until just a little bit ago, but so I will look at the content a little bit more. I think I can echo. I was going to use the exact words that Warren used. Coming up with a roadmap. I'm just noticing the road. There's 2 pages of climate action in Concord, where we talk about all that we have done. I don't know if there's a way to build upon that, to show kind of a roadmap for the plan. Maybe not, but I just noted that, maybe there's some way to tie the 2 together. I think help people to find the information that they're most interested in, recognizing that there's so much there. The other thing, just I think organizationally, and I think I was okay with it in the first draft, but now that I'm looking at it in the more InDesign format, I'm I don't know, I guess confused maybe. We've got the sort of the three overarching leadership sections, leadership on climate action. Oh, maybe that's the whole section, sorry. And then we move to sort of the why, and I don't know, should those be flipped? Do we do the why first and then, I don't know, I'll have to think on that, but that was something that the first three sections, or let's see, climate impacts, greenhouse gas emissions, leadership on climate action seemed a little bit different, but when I dig into the meat, maybe that's not the case. I didn't know if it was worth differentiating those with different colors or not. Maybe not. But I'll just add that. And then I mean, they've done a fabulous job with the graphics. I think it looks, so much different and as someone said, professional. So kudos to them on that. And Kate, for whatever input you had on that too. So yeah, but I'll get you some specific comments on content in a couple days.
Thanks. We did move that section up, so if that jumped out at anybody else as being not the right order, let me know. It felt a little like too far down the line, and it seemed like it kind of balanced with like, here's what we've done in the past and here's the leadership we want to take going forward. But that did move it up before the climate impacts and the greenhouse gas emissions. So we did kind of go back and forth on that. So
Okay.
as you read it again, I would be interested if it does feel off there. So thank you.
Okay.
Okay, great. Pam, would you like to give your feedback?
Okay. I also have not done a deep dive on this particular version, but I have read it through. And just in response to Brian, your introductory comments, I think that's probably my biggest concern, is the fact that we are holding off on, assertive statements or principles in this document on the strength of what's going to happen in the future as we go forward. And I wonder if there is a way for us to set a tone, even this late in the game, that suggests much more assertively how serious a matter this is and how much discipline and challenge and even sacrifice this is going to take. And so I would just suggest that there be an effort made to tonally really get at the sobriety of this issue, and tonally really get at the engagement of our very kind of demographic in creating the problem and having the greatest power in many ways to correct the problem. And I just don't think it comes through. So I just would encourage you, and maybe we can play with this together or something. Maybe it's too late, but I think that there is a tone here that is missing in that very important element. I also think that ties to comments I've made often on the document, which is that it's a very nice, it's funny because it's dense, but it's not dense. It's dense, but it's not, it's very soft. It encourages us. It lets us feel good about doing things that are actually, many of them are not that difficult to do. What it doesn't do is create a plan where we are saying that here's the kind of stuff you have to do. And it may hurt and it may be costly, but this is what climate change is all about. And this is how a path setting or a place like Concord can help contribute. So I guess I'm making a kind of broad comment about tonally, it's too much of a feel-good document to me, A, and B, it doesn't have any teeth. It doesn't say anything about what we must do. It's all about, we're encouraged to do this, we're encouraged to think about that, who knows who's going to pay for it. So it's this, and the reason I think that many of the comments go to questions of, road mapping and executive summaries, because it is a big banquet. It's a big banquet. It's like going to a banquet table and being able to choose what you eat, and yet not really having the kind of guidance that is required. I'm sorry if I sound negative. I don't mean to be. I know that it's not going to surprise you that I'm saying what I'm saying, and I don't know that there's anything we can do at this late date. I would say that it is possible to correct the tone a little bit, and I think it is possible to create more assertive, not just encouragement to do nice things, but to be much more forceful in our devotion to this problem and to its solutions. Finally, I think that it, and I haven't looked, I read it once with this new version, but I do continue to feel like it's a nice kind of natural resources document and preparedness document than a greenhouse gases document. It's the problem that we have is greenhouse gases, and they may show up in, forests and stuff like that, and, water usage. But the bottom line is the emissions of carbon dioxide. And I think that the plan has, for a variety of reasons, morphed into it or became a document that favored things that are very soft lobs and very, kind of inconsequential in a place like Concord. So I would look at the balance between the greenhouse gas emission issues and the natural resources, preparedness, the other kinds of things. But I think we have come a long way, and I hope that we can continue to make progress in Concord.
Okay, great. I think you'll find some of my comments will echo yours. John, do you want to give your feedback?
Yep, thanks. So I like the structure of the plan. I thought that that worked well. And I especially liked where the plan pointed out sort of what our goals are in terms of the 80 by 50 goal and the need to reduce emissions by 45% by 2030 based on the IPCC, and then showing what our rate of change is. And I thought that makes the point that we have to at least double or triple our level of effort. And so perhaps to some of Pam's comments, there could be some more explicit language there that builds off of those graphics. In terms of the communications thing, the way I look at these plans is they're not the vehicle you want to use for communications and engagement. These plans are meant to be a reference for the people doing the work, something that you have to dig into, and that you have to have a separate communications and engagement program or plan that recognizes there are different audiences that need different kinds of messages. And perhaps that's a topic we could discuss in the future, is how to bring out the information that's in the plan and get it across to people in different venues and in different ways. And I can't remember now if the plan talks about some of that, but I think this is just sort of the foundation that then we build off of in terms of implementation. So my big sort of fundamental thing, as Brian knows with the plan, is the energy, the renewable energy piece of this. And I think it will, without getting into the pros and cons of RECs, I think there's a philosophical issue of, what is it the town really want? What does the town really want to do? Is it about showing that Concord is, zero carbon? Is that our image? Or is it to reduce greenhouse gas emissions going into the atmosphere? And I know that maybe it's not clear what that distinction is, but because the town right now is moving in the direction of relying a lot on buying renewable energy certificates, which is not the same as having a renewable energy or renewable electricity supply. That it focuses more on what our image is rather than on reducing emissions to the atmosphere, which is the ultimate goal I think that we should really be behind. Because otherwise, by counting on RECs, I think you basically, that part of the plan is creating a mirage of reducing emissions. I thought the plan could have been explicit about the town government making a commitment to meeting the goals. I think the town government leading by example is important when we're going to ask businesses and other entities and residents to do these things. And I think a lot of the elements are in the plan, but they need to be more cohesive. And I think there needs to be an explicit commitment from town government that with its own operations is going to meet these goals. I think, I agree with Pam that the plan is soft in the sense that it's focused more on encouragement and some incentives. But this is reducing emissions to the level that we have to do. We have to do that. That's a really hard thing, and we can't gloss over that. There are going to have to be requirements to really get to these goals. We're not going to get there by encouragement and incentives alone. The resilience or preparedness part of the plan, I thought had a lot of good stuff in it. I think it still tends to focus only on the extremes of climate change and doesn't bring out enough that our average or normal climate is shifting as well, and there are implications to that. And that'll tie back to energy usage when we're using energy more to cool our buildings than to heat them. So I think that could be brought out some more. And then lastly, it didn't come out in the plan that we should be planning with future climate parameters, that when we build new infrastructure, we design buildings, that we should be designing for some future projected climate rather than using the historic parameters, whether that's flooding or it's temperature or something else. And I think that's a really important concept to get out there, because we have to stop planning for the past. We have to plan for the future. So that's, in a nutshell, my comments.
Okay, great. In my order, I see Ruthie and Peter. Peter, you did not get a chance, is that correct?
I apologize. I had a practicing clarinet in the background that relocate for that.
All right. Why don't you give your feedback now then?
Okay. I mean, I really appreciate the density, but at the same time, I do want it to be accessible to our community, and I agree with Pam that we need to giddy up and lead and tell our community why it's important to not delay. And I know I mentioned it briefly last time, and I know Ruthie, that sort of, you said you'd be willing to explore, what's a top 10? What can we tell our residents that for the individual, that, these are the top 10 things you could be doing. Yes, supporting your town plan, but also to have a roadmap, perhaps for the individual at a household level, so that they can lock on to something and have an individual plan within a household. And should we say, why this is so important? Just as a reminder, and I feel like as this committee within our town, it's, we need to lead, and we need to be telling people it's time to get going, and sooner is better. and the financial incentives, or, how do you encourage people to make these changes within their lives? If we can have those mechanisms in place, I think that's going to be really important to getting people to buy in, or to make those steps forward. I guess I'll pause it there. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Can I'm sorry, where you said we can drop in and out a little bit.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, sorry, I briefly, I forgot, and Peter reminded me. I think some important things that must happen, that just must happen, I think would be good to have the courage to say. I don't even know what those are right now, but I think it might be worth the time to figure out what those things would be. The other thing is that it occurred, I wanted to mention this and I forgot, is that the have done thing really bothers me. We lead with, we have done this, we have done that. Well, what we have done is really not all that much. And I would put that maybe as an afterthought. I mean, I don't want to hear what we have done. I want to hear what we have to do. So I guess I just would add that in, but I wanted also to just pick up on Peter's point that one of the ways to get at the having more teeth and being more frontal would be to be saying that, any new construction has to be residential, has to be X, has to be solar or something, or other things like that. But I think, and I do remember the last time we spoke, there was some discussion of that sort of an exercise being undertaken and put in the plan. But also the have done chorus through the whole thing annoyed me because I don't want to hear that.
Okay.
Except as a reference, perhaps.
Ruthie, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I think last time, Peter, when we talked about sort of what we wanted to do was, I thought it was the schools, right? Where we were saying, like, we need to be bolder over there, because it impacts, tons of families through their students. And, we don't have to ask each individual family. I think also specifically we're building a new school. So I think that's what we talked about last time, was sort of like those bigger, bolder moves. We're going to spend
a family, what should we be doing, and have that printed out. When a student walks into the school, it's in their face. This is what I should be bringing home to my family, because this is what our town is telling us to do.
Right. I mean, if you go to the high school, there's so much stuff that is on all the walls, right? This, it would be great if they saw this, as much, or, as much as other big. I think I said it last time, like if COVID-19 were because of climate change, we would have solved climate change, So like
part of the curriculum.
Not just part of the curriculum. I mean, part of the curriculum, but also like, on those glass windows in the cafeteria, or at every football game, at every soccer game, at Kicks for Cancer, everywhere that all the students are already want to go.
I don't want to get too much into implementation of some of these ideas. I love it. Mike, did you have something you wanted to say? You look like you had a comment.
Well, I did not raise my hand, but since you've given me an opportunity here, it strikes me as you read the plan that it's deliberately very cautious. I think that's essentially what you come away with. You don't come away with a sense that there is an emergency around us. And the irony to that is that the front part of the narrative, when climate, the hypothesis and the effects of climate are talked about, it comes very strongly that this is a very serious environmental emergency we're facing. But then when you follow up with tactically, and I know I've talked, many, many times, and people are tired of hearing about it, that we're effectively trying to write an operations plan, not a climate plan, an operation. And we don't really have that specific, and I think what Pam and what I'm hearing from others is that kind of deliberation, timeline, accountability is still to be discovered. And I'll close by saying that the last meeting we spent a good amount of time talking about, and Brian, you teed it up, about accountability. Who is going to be leading this and responsible for this, and that you could go back to those 22 actions and say that things are going great or we need to do something differently. And it was laid out in the minutes quite nicely about the departments and who in those departments would be responsible. And I think there needs to be clarity going forward about that level of governance and accountability. So thanks for the opportunity.
Well, I'll go through my feedback and give you guys the opportunity to give comments as well. Going through this, the table of contents, the idea of shortcutting to things that people are interested in, I think that's a great idea. I had my wife do a proofread of this document because she's really good at copy editing. And she found it as a great recruitment tool to see what was going on in town and to see other people have similar interests to her, and then to be able to see those champions listed and to get a sense of where to go to find out more information. So I think that is a great side benefit. Generally, over this entire document, the idea of it being readable to the average citizen versus, as John put it, more of a technical roadmap that had the town as a consensus on, with more detail and more technical. I would have liked it to be more technical, more of a resource of, this is what we've agreed on, use the terminology and the metrics that are actionable, and harder for the average person to read, and then do as John suggested, which is more of create documents based on the plan to then speak to the community about the plan. But that, that's not going to change at this point, but maybe in future versions. The letter from the town manager, he's a nice guy, but I found it disappointing. Disappointing in the sense that he didn't take responsibility to make sure this gets done. He talked about the town will get this done. It's very diffuse in accountability, as Pam has mentioned many times. I was very much hoping that it would be a recognition of the value that sustainability, the town of Concord puts on sustainability, and how it has an equal voice at the table with finance and with other things that we cherish in Concord. So I was hoping for a stronger, more take charge tone. Going on, honestly, I did not focus as much on things like the introduction, the history. I think the history is something that most people want to see the stuff they've worked on done, but it's not really going to be additive to future efforts. I think we have to stop looking at what we've done and making ourselves feel okay, and look at what we have to work on. And then in the section about greenhouse gas emissions, I don't remember who made the comment, but I do agree that the section that says path to meet our greenhouse gas reduction goals, it talks about how we have to reduce by 3.5% a year, and then mentions that between 2008 and 2016, we reduced by 1% a year. And I agree with, people don't get that. The public doesn't get that. I don't know how heavy I want to hit them with it, personally. I think I've known a lot of people who tell me about the doom and gloom that climate change will create. And I find that the average person does get turned off by that. And I have always had a position of show them that doing these things is higher performance, better for them personally, and it's better for the environment. That's why I tend to focus on those areas that I can make that case. Getting a 3% reduction year over year is going to be very aggressive and may need a mix of both. And I don't like telling people to doom and gloom and scaring them, but I do agree that at some point it will be needed. Other comments? The priorities, I think it's great that we have, as a town, said publicly an agreed upon set of 22 actions that says these are the things that we feel are going to have the biggest impact and we should work on. And I love the fact of the municipal leadership has listed themselves as champions and has been so heavily engaged through the process. I'm disappointed with the weak wording and some of the other things, but that weak wording is stuff that they feel they can do. It's up to us to push them a little harder because we have to get to that 3.5% per year. But we've now got more detail to work with them on, to say, this is our outline, this is our blueprint of how those departments move forward. Let's get more detail, let's get into the weeds, let's actually start to take real action. Because I am tired of writing reports. Going along, I do like most of the blueprints. I do have thoughts on different blueprints and things, with the biggest disappointment being the energy section where it mentions utility scale batteries because that is what is already in the strategic plan, but distributed batteries, more aggressive efforts for energy services from the light plant and financial mechanisms for them to have their customers put up the capital for these systems and know that they can get a return on an environment where the avoided cost is shared with those that make the investments. I think that's not as well in here. I think batteries need a much more prominent role, and we can't really wait 5 years, but it's not in here because that's not our townwide view on it, which is a bit disappointing. But I think generally I'm happy that we've done the prioritization, that we have something that is beyond a desire to do everything. One of the things I'm kind of glad isn't prominent in the document is things that we're not focusing on. I brought this up at the CSEC meeting and we went down a rabbit hole of, well, why not? Well, we can, and these things can get done. It takes up time and effort and resources when we talk about things like eating less meat or things that we don't have a lot of control over. One of the comments about it encourages residents to make changes. I wish we could mandate more. And I do hope that this committee continues to explore what we can mandate and what we can't. Article 40 is a great example of pushing those boundaries. But that's, we as a town have control over 4% of the energy consumption in town because we have control over the municipal sector. We don't have control over the commercial sector and how they do their day-to-day operations. We can encourage, we can incentivize, we can look for policies that nudge them in the right direction. And this document helps us lay out some of those tools that we need to dig deeper into to move that forward. So I took up a lot of time giving my thoughts, but and Kate has heard many of these throughout the process. I think things like mobility and bikes and complete streets is very important. I think, I hope to come back to this committee as soon as I can to give a good comprehensive history and view of our strategy for clean electricity, as John has pointed out about the REC strategy, because it does need a big, complete contextual understanding for everyone in town, not just this committee, to reference. So I'm going to get off my little soapbox and let us get back to the agenda. But I did offer, if anyone heard of my ideas and wants to add to that, that's a member of the committee, let me know.
I would.
Go ahead.
I really would. I think this is a really good conversation. And I'll start by just commenting that, you know, I really like what your wife said, because it's exactly the problem with this thing. It's not a recruitment document. It's not supposed to be a recruitment tool. It's not supposed to do that sort of stuff. It's supposed to do something quite different. So I would use that observation and kind of chew on it a little bit. But more importantly, I think that there are a couple of things we could do that would, I'm a big systemic change type person. I think systemic changes are really important, and just getting in the weeds sometimes isn't all that important, and this town isn't going to solve climate. But having said that, your mention of the town manager's letter, I thought there was irony in that, your comment, because I think the reason he wrote it that way is because the plan sounds that way. And the plan itself is tonally, you know, a really feel-good kind of don't rock the boat kind of thing when you get right down to it. So I would I've made this suggestion before in getting to the systemic change thing. One of the things we could do to help the town manager is in the plan, say something about the accountability of the town manager. Talk specifically about writing a policy document immediately, which often administrations at the federal level do, saying, we want this to happen, and directing all town government committees, boards, departments to the extent they can lawfully do it, follow the Article 51. And we could have said things like that, but we didn't. And I don't think it's too late. So I would say specifically, say in the plan, we want the town, the board of the select board to, you know, issue a statement requiring, let's say, the HDC to take, you know, to factor in all of these things, you know, whatever they are, Article 51, et cetera, when it's making its decision. Have a statement in there that says the town manager should be making this a top priority. The town manager should be directing the sustainability director, not the deputy town manager. And that there should be statements in there saying that in the next 3 years, the performance agreements of all staff that are relevant will include that. You can do things like that. And you can throw in some real, you know, scary stuff like, you know, new construction shall be boom, 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 as far as we're concerned. So that's the kind of stuff I think that would really change this. And I do think that there are a few things we could do at the systemic level that would help the town manager and the select board get the ball rolling, much the way, you know, other governmental authorities do when setting a new tone. And we haven't done that here. And so I have no problem with the town manager because he's doing what we do.
Okay. Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to be emphatic, but you know, and I say it lovingly because I think it's really, really hard, and we all have different points of view, you know.
It is, and I think my my thoughts on that is you know, it's difficult. It's difficult to ask in the first draft of this plan for the town to be committed to making some of these implementation steps happen when they don't know about funding and leadership. As we talked about before, when we talked about accountability, I think that giving the select board and the town manager the final plan and giving them the ability to come back to us and say, here's how it's going to happen. Here's how we're going to integrate it into the town actions. And then being more aggressive. I still think that that's a good course of action.
I know we disagree. I'll just say that the town had the town voted an article that committed to the very thing that we're trying to implement. I just would leave it at that, Brian.
Yep.
And also remind you that the Energy Future Task Force did make some assertive, recommendations that were much stronger than this, and the town picked up on them.
Yep.
So it's not hard. It's not, if you feel like doing it, you can do it. You can do it.
Well, we're contributing to the plan. We're not running the plan, but okay, thank you.
Yep.
Mike, do you have a quick comment?
I think it's a quick comment. I'm trying to think of a bridge here because we can see the conversation is, we're in two different places. But Brian, I think that if we go back to all of those plans that many of us were given, all the way back to having the chance to read Boston plans, I read John's plan, Boulder's plan, San Francisco. We're not the only ones in this space. And one of the characteristics of those plans that were most exciting and most inspiring is they focused around 3 different areas to create substantive change. They used ordinances, they used bylaws, and they used policy. And I think that within our plan, as we go forward and we get these priorities much more clarified, we should be in a position in leadership to say, these will be done by an ordinance, these will be done by a bylaw, and these will be done by policy. And if we look at our experience with Article 40, which we're going to hear next, that is an enormous change.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened because we were willing to step out of encouragement, suggest, consider, evaluate, to words like how we are going to do this and how we will enable it. And
Yes.
I'm hopeful that we go forward with the plan, that we start to use that kind of language. And I would, ask John, when I think about comparing our plans, because Cambridge is oftentimes that example of leadership, are there best practices that from your experience that you see that are much more assertive? I don't know if the word is assertive, but they're much more
So just,
single, and if that would
sorry,
be
Mike.
helpful.
I do want to keep us somewhat on schedule, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think your ideas might be better later in the agenda when we talk about what will CAAB do in the upcoming meetings. So come back to those thoughts. Any final feedback that anyone would like to give that's a member?
Yeah, John, I had my hand up. Well, virtually. It's
I
okay.
wasn't watching the virtual hand.
That's
Sorry.
I think that, the plan's obviously not going to change a lot between now and the end of the month. And so I think it's worth just looking at it as a foundation, and then how can we take it to another level. And so I think it would be helpful if the plan had some element that was basically a jumping off point of, well, how do we take this plan to the next level? And part of it, I think, is maybe a little more clarity on accountability. Like, I'm not sure what kind of review process there will be, I thank Michael for pointing to Cambridge, but not that we should always be the example, but the Climate Advisory Committee, which has been there since 2002, is the accountability board basically for the plan and other plans that are related to the climate action plan. And so basically there's an annual review done, right? So I think that kind of role would be good to spell out, because that, or if the town prefers another way to have accountability, that's fine. But I think it's important for there to be transparency and a specific way that the accountability will happen. Otherwise, your eyes get taken off the ball.
So I think that's, again, another good topic to bring up later in the agenda when we talk about what CAAB will work on in the future.
Right, but I think having it in the plan, it doesn't have to be detailed, is helpful.
Yeah, I'll leave that to Kate to see if that can be integrated into the plan. Courtney?
Just a quick question. Some of the plans that we looked at way back when in their blueprint section had kind of relative costs included in the actions. Did we decide not to include those at some point, or did I miss that, or is that yet to come?
I'm going to let Kate answer that.
Okay.
So that's one of the things that we talked about, and Warren has suggested, and we did add some detail into the next step section about the accountability and what's next in terms of evaluating the relative costs. So I think that's what comes next. And so I think the way that John's described this as, foundation, a jumping off point, resonates with me, because it's not every single thing that is going to take us to our goals, right? We're going to need policies and ordinances, but this is about very clear priorities, which are the commitments of, like, these are the things that we know are priorities. And for example, with buildings, I've seen reports dating back 10 years talking about policy options for buildings, and we haven't moved those forward yet, I think, for many reasons. But the fact that we're able to put this down as a priority commitment and assign a champion to it, and the steps are, okay, we need to seriously look at this and decide, right? Like, what is the policy option for Concord? Pick one, do the work, and then get it done, right? And this lays that groundwork to enable us to take something that's been ideas that have been floating around forever and actually move them forward into an action. So it may not be as specific as we'd like to see, because we still have more work to do to figure out what is that specific step that's important for Concord. So I do think that we can add to that next step section and kind of highlight that the cost thing is one thing we really need to think about more of, and add to the kind of report back mechanism. So I don't want to take us over. I know we're already over schedule, Brian, so.
Yeah. All right, so this is transitioning into, this has been great. This feedback's been very good. But I do want to go on to the next part of the agenda, which is a letter for Article 40. I received it just now, just before the meeting. So I want to, for timing purposes of our agenda today, and for the fact that you guys haven't really seen this draft, I think I'm going to punt this topic to the next meeting, and I will share it with you, Laura, as well, and anyone else who would like to see the draft. But yes, it is a good letter that shows our support and some of our reasoning why. But I'd like the committee to have more time to do it right, and to put more detail into that letter, because it is such an important article to make sure it passes. So I'm going to move on to discussion of the agenda items for the rest of 2020 for this committee. So we have a plan now that has blueprints, and even though CAAB is only listed really, and I was kind of surprised, on a few of the actions in the building section, going to Mike's point about policy and development, and about what can this group do to move these implementation steps forward, and where do we want to focus our efforts going forward for the rest of this year? What's the priorities on the different things that are in this plan that we want to see developed? And I have a long list. I have a 2-page list of items that we could work on, but I want to hear from others. And if no one else wants to go, I can go. But does someone want to raise their hand if they'd like to? John, you still have your hand up. Is that from before, or?
It was from before, but I do want to say
go right
something.
ahead then. Kick us off.
So I think that the adaptation section has some good things in it, and I like that. It's saying we have to understand the challenges more before we can actually figure out what to do. But I think it's a big topic, and I think the committee needs to spend more time focusing on what adaptation in Concord means. And so, you know, I think there are a lot of possible subtopics there. And so maybe we could go through an exercise of what to focus on, whether it's, you know, I think forest management is a big thing, and it's not an issue that a lot of communities are really focused on. And so I think it's a place where the Concord could distinguish itself and provide some leadership that would help other towns that have large areas of forest land. You know, it could be that, but it could be something around the urban forest canopy part of the plan, or building and design standards.
So John, that was what I asked for, but I think I want to take us a step back and ask about how do we want the committee to work on the blueprints, more of a process. So a good example is, you know, quite a lot about forests and about those kind of parts of this plan, whereas others might have more understanding about water and some of the storm preparedness planning, and others may have more interest in buildings. Do we want to buddy up and have two members, partner up members, and have them kind of pick similar things that they find really interesting in the plan, and kind of noodle what this board could do going forward? This is because I don't think we can really have, I'll get to you in a second, Pam. I don't think we can really have a good discussion in this group about trees and forests unless we all get educated on it. I don't think that we can do that for every topic and be efficient with our time. The idea of having two members go off and do a deep dive on things that they both find interesting. What is your thoughts on that? Pam, you had your hand up.
No, actually, I was going to ask you to go even a step farther back. If the question is, what are our next meetings going to be like? I think we need to look at what the role of the CAAB is. Again, I think we need to revisit what is our basic role, and what role do we play with respect to accountability, to oversight? What kind of information should we expect to receive to play whatever role we have? I think it's a worthy thing to have that conversation. If there's a point to do that conversation, it's now. But I've seen many committees just spend forever talking about. I bet if you went around the room, we wouldn't be in agreement on what our role is. But it's just my point of view, and I'm raising it. And if it's not one you want to embrace, that's fine.
It's a good idea. My concern is just we could spend forever discussing who we are and what we should do, and I want to make sure that we use the climate action plan as a stepping off point for more work, so that we can get to the actual implementations and actions. As Mike has talked about, coming up with ordinances and policies, I think that would be very good for this committee. We have a lot of stuff in this blueprint where we could do that. That's what I would like to see, and that's my idea, but that's not decided as what we are doing. So I want to get more ideas from the committee.
I think it's a good idea that your notion of having a couple members kind of go off. In some cases it might be, assuming it's allowed, that we can have some kind of subcommittee on some topics, because a lot of these topics are just too much to go into in these full board meetings. And so if we can distill that, and I think in some cases having some outside expertise involved, we all know a lot of people, so I'm sure we can engage people to help us think through some of that, and then to bring that, once it's distilled to the full committee would be, I think that's a good way to go. I realize that means suggesting more work by board members, but so obviously everyone's in a different position on their ability to do that. But I think that could be a useful thing to do.
Warren.
Yeah. Following up on several of these comments, I would like our next task, in effect, to be an assessment of the plan and its feasibility of actually being implemented. And some of the things it would be good to know is which of the actions in the plan we think are going to happen with very little prodding from this committee, very little additional appropriation from the town, where there's the relevant parties are on the way and they're going to do it. Which are the things where there are significant trade-offs between different ones of the actions that if you focus on this, you're taking people away from that? Which are the ones that we think are the biggest priorities? And which are the ones where we think as a committee, if we focused on X topic or Y topic, we could make the biggest difference by developing policy recommendations. And because what you got on the plan, it's a pretty broad-based approach with a lot of different things moving ahead slowly. Some of those things will just keep moving on their own. Some won't happen without us, and some of them need to move a lot faster than are in the plan. And one thing we might want to do is have the committee divide up the actions and different people take responsibility for becoming the expert on that topic. I don't mean the expert on the topic in the broad global sense, but the expert on understanding what's going on in the town on the topic, who are the relevant parties for implementing it, what those folks think about it, and we could each take a couple of the things in the plan and run with it.
I think that's a great idea. So kind of I want to say blueprint, but I'm sure there's going to be broader topics like the cross-cutting priorities. But the blueprint, having a member of CAAB be the lead on a certain blueprint.
Yeah.
Just trying to write that down as a note. Anyone else want to make a comment? Do you want to raise your hand? Any other members? Okay. Anyone else want to talk about generally what they think we should work on going forward? Mike?
I think one of the areas that we can work on going forward, and we're uniquely poised in Concord because we the people own the Concord Municipal Light Plant. They're an energy delivery company, and they deliver energy in a number of different ways. They deliver it on the supply side, which they're doing a magnificent job, I think, moving towards 100% renewable energy. And they deliver it on the demand side. And the demand side is more challenging to them because we don't have the level of sophistication that we could have. So I think that working with our municipal light plant much more strategically, understanding, and before when I say working with them, first of all, understanding them, understanding what are their business requirements, clarity around all the things that are very complicated, like time of use rates. What are time of use rates? How would we communicate time of use rates to a homeowner, right? Just understanding that and then leveraging that incredible capacity that they have, because if there's any organization that can think about scale, right? I mean, we've done some great things. I think it was mentioned earlier across the spectrum of intervention strategies. Concord is leading. Now, 400 cars is good, but we need 8,000, right? What is it? Less than 20% of the homes have been evaluated for an EUI. Well, we probably want that to be 75%. And the light plant is the organization that it has at its nucleus, first of all, an understanding about energy and how it's delivered, but could package this, working with the board in ways that I think would be very, very effective. So I just think being more strategic with them and having their partnership, not us telling them to do things or them telling us to do things, but a partnership that says, what is it we're trying to do in common? So going forward, the municipal light plan could be a great partner.
Okay. Other topics that people want to mention or that we could work on as a committee?
I don't know if this is a topic, but I guess following along, I'm still
Sure.
wanting to partner with the schools.
Okay.
And I don't have a whole lot of time because I have to go, but I feel like we're building a new building. Thousands of kids come through there. They're the next generation. They're living it. It feels to me like, and although we don't control the schools, we have more ability to have input there than on individual residences, individual people. So I feel like it's sort of next after the municipal buildings and fleet and all that. The schools are for the next place. So, and I'm sorry, I have to leave, but
Okay.
thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you, Ruthie.
See you, Ruthie.
Bye.
Hi.
Thanks, Ruthie. So,
Brian, I'll jump in just a few comments.
there you are.
Just building on what Michael and Warren mentioned, I think it is important for us to think about the areas where we can drive on the mitigation side. I think mitigation should be a priority, particularly areas where policies or changes to procedures or bylaws or whatever it may be can drive significant reductions in emissions, and whether that's the light plan accelerating their plan to transition to 100% clean energy. And I think addressing, John's concerns about RECs and having that discussion is important. I think it's really important that we focus on buildings and what role should we play to help drive decision making and advocate for policies that we feel will make a difference in the town and that the town can actually implement. But I think getting back to Warren's point, a lot of this depends on like, where do we have the influence? Where does the town feel comfortable already and have almost like a little bit of a roadmap where maybe we don't need to spend as much time? So I think that's gonna, we're gonna need insights from Kate and other folks on where are the best places to focus our time. And even within the blueprints, there may be a couple areas where we can really add more value than if we tried to, each of us tried to get expertise on that blueprint. It might not be the best use of time. So I would just encourage us to try and prioritize and try and tackle areas that if we can move faster and we can mitigate, we can have a bigger impact earlier. That's going to help us obviously down the road, because the sooner we can reduce, the better.
Hey, Mike, can you mute? Thank you. I can hear you tapping.
Thank you.
Thank you. So any other feedback on going forward? But if I was to summarize, it sounds like Warren's idea of going through the plan and seeing where CAAB could really be an asset to the town to move things forward, and maybe then after that look to see which members have an interest in buddying up on a particular topic into doing the deep dive and bringing that to the larger committee might be a good starting path forward. Is that a good summary, or did I miss any major things that were mentioned that people feel is important? Okay.
There was one other topic. We talked a lot about how this plan is not accessible. And so I think thinking about communications and engagement, not about the sort of tactical things to do, but, do we need to have a campaign? Can we partner with the private sector? Those sorts of things.
Yeah. So to your point though of the plan being too large and technical for that? Should it be making the plan, it should be an education campaign about ideas in the plan versus getting that plan read by citizens? Is that a better understanding of that comment?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's how to get people to action, right? And so I don't think getting people to read the plan is the goal. I think it's more to get people to understand what's in the plan.
Okay.
They don't have to read the plan to do that. But it's also, how are we going to engage all the people of the town, all the businesses, the institutions to participate, because it's going to take all hands on deck to achieve our goals.
And did anyone else have a thought? All right. I have, a long list of summary in the plan. I do want to mention that for upcoming meetings, we should also talk about articles for town meeting. We have talked about them in the past. One of the ideas in the past was to bring, there was 3 planning board articles, Article 32, 34, and 36. And my notes say that the committee wanted to have them come talk and explaining more about those articles and their impact. I believe that those have had their hearing. So if members could just go back and see if they have a position on those, or if they really do need more information before I request them for a future meeting.
Brian, can you say which ones those were again, just for the notes?
Yes, it was Article 32, 34, and 36. Additional dwelling units, PRD and table principal use regulations, and relief from parking requirements. Just as an update, I do know that the high school is not moving forward on their capital Article 28, which is the parking lots. Article 31 is agreed to and not moving forward at town meeting for discussion, which was the fleet electrification report. And we are writing and drafting a letter as support for Article 40, so we don't need to discuss that. The last article that we had previously discussed was the funding request for school buses, Article 30, and the committee wanted to see more of the cost-benefit analysis. And I, as the petitioner, have not done the hearing for that yet. So once that is completed, I can come back to the committee and talk about the presentation and cost-benefit if they'd like. Other town meeting, let's see. Oh, should this committee start thinking about not this 2020 town meeting, but the 2021 town meeting, and what within this plan does this committee feel should be brought to that meeting for any kind of funding articles or policy articles? I just wanted to mention that as a topic. I've mentioned the presentation about working with a light board member. I don't know if Alice is still on, but I'm going to ask her to help me with this. Having Laura Scott, myself, and a light board member talk about the clean electricity strategy in RECs. And then I had another idea of many of the sustainable advocacy groups are very involved in what CAAB is doing. And it would be good to have them come and maybe give us a presentation of who they are, what their focus is, what their priorities are, and how CAAB may be able to assist them. This could be Concord Can, Mothers Up Front, Mass Energize, the Bike Fest group, Newburyport. There's quite a long list to give them a voice in where we're going. There was a lot of actions related to water conservation. The new middle school I had here is a topic that we could talk about. Planning board has requested in the past for CAAB to help it with its definitions of sustainable development and mobility with multimodal mobility. There's many other topics beyond the plan that we could also be working on. So of that long list of things I just kind of read off, any other, anyone want to make a comment on those?
I think your point about the what we could tee up for articles in whatever year going forward that are aligned, I think it's a great idea, and I think we should, look at that as something we really want to dig in on.
Excellent. I can share this list with the group as well, so I'll share that. With that, I think that would conclude the agenda. We have public comments, but before I open up for public comments, is anything members would like to bring up before we move there? Mike, I think you're muted. Mike?
Building on what was said earlier, I think that, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
That it seems to me CAAB is an organization that is poised to actually develop these articles. As we listen across our town and we listen across all of our customers and we see the presence of where change could happen, we could write articles and we could sponsor those articles. And if we've seen how the biggest changes happen, it's been the citizenry that are just standing up and creating articles, right? And how cool would it be as an informed body? And it would be articles that I think that would be really well engaged, because we have the body is so strong with so much expertise. And it seems to me we could do that would be a terrific way to actually be engaged with the town and actually create change quickly.
Warren?
Yeah, I really endorse what both Pam and Michael are saying in terms of doing additional articles as a really important role for this committee. And if we want this plan that's now in place to continue to build momentum, we need to be showing it through town meeting each year that there's more stuff happening. But the other thing I really wanted to say, we all owe Kate a real vote of thanks for her work on this plan.
Yes.
It was a really not an easy thing to put together. She's dealing with a difficult committee of strong-willed individuals here, and she's maintained her patience, and she's really improved the thing as it's moved along.
I'll second that. I think that should be clearly read into the minutes or put into the minutes.
And not once said, "Go pound sand, Michael," when it was due.
I would never say that. No, thank you, Warren. That's very kind. And I'm very lucky to have this group of experts who care so passionately about making sure that Concord achieves its goals. So thank you. I'm glad to have you all to advise.
Excellent.
One quickly, Brian, I know you nixed the idea of what is our role, but I think it sounds like from what has happened today in this part of the agenda is our role is, it's still unclear to me. I mean, we are writing articles, we are becoming experts in particular sub things. I really don't know what our role is. So I'm just going to hit that one more time. And maybe at a future meeting, you can take a shot at what you think our role is.
Well, that we were talking about ideas of what to do in the future. That's why so many things were discussed. It wasn't supposed to be succinct. It was supposed to be, what do we want to do in the future? How do we want to proceed? So yeah, and
No, I don't. I think it was fine. I'm just saying. I don't know exactly what. And then I think this is a good juncture to have maybe the chair or somebody explain what we're up to actually as a.
Yeah. So I think
not now necessarily, but just
I understand.
Yeah.
Let me finish. So I didn't nix your idea of discussing what our role is. I think it's important to do that every so often, but I have seen committees spend their entire time talking about what is our role. So that's my concern. I'm not trying to nix that idea.
You can manage that problem as the chair. You can do that.
So I feel this committee's role going forward is very important. I feel that we as a group are very much able to help develop good policy, very much the things that Mike had said, ordinances, policy, doing the leveraging our understandings of our different areas of sustainability to come up with good governance around moving towards sustainability. That's where I think this advisory board in particular has a real strength. I think it's hard to leverage that because some of us are really good at water and resiliency, some of us are good at trees, and some of us are good at energy. And when it's not your topic, it's easy to go, why are we doing this? So keeping us focused will be the biggest challenge.
I think that's helpful, Brian, though, to put some meat, as Pam was advocating for, around kind of our role, because then I think that list that you presented was long.
It was.
And just making sure that, because we have limited resources and time and energy, making sure that we're focused on, the best and highest use of that time and energy. So I think if we can bring those two things together, the list with our role, that'll help us prioritize.
That is the hope of this part of the discussion going forward.
I mean, I think a fundamental role is the accountability role, that someone has to shine the light on how we're doing as a community. And, I think it's useful if the plan gives us that explicit role, then we have more legitimacy. But I think that's a key thing.
So having brought this up, it's not a motion. I just think that there should be time spent on some agenda going forward where this group is able to talk together about our role. I love what Courtney said too about, it'll help us know where we can best focus our energies given our particular talents. I think it's time well spent once in a while to do that. And I have absolute confidence in your ability as the chair to keep it, controlled.
Your confidence is misplaced. I think where we are as a committee with completing this plan, I think it would be a good idea to go back and just look at our charge, look at the plan, and pick out where we could put our best efforts, and a summary of that as a statement for a set of CAAB goals for what are we going to try to do with our remaining 2020, and then and just not bite off too much, but just bite off that. And I'll try to summarize that and send it around. And if people want to make sure their ideas are on that, shoot me an email.
And spend some time. Allocate some time in a meeting for us to talk to each other.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I would like to move on to public comments. Laura, do you have some public comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, thank you, Brian. So the first thing I'd like to say is I'd like to go back to the idea of what items must happen, because obviously 60% of emissions comes from buildings. And if I'm reading the plan correctly, it says the number of all electric buildings needs to rise from 136 residential buildings to 95% of the housing stock by 2030. Maybe I'm not reading that correctly, but that does seem to be what it says in the section on buildings. And so for that reason, I think it's really essential that the language gets tweaked a little bit, at least a little bit, to be more explicit about the fact that we have to stop building buildings that burn fossil fuels. And you know, I don't know if you want to name Article 40 directly, but you know, something that would point to that would be great. Or, and I think the other thing that could be explicitly spelled out is advocating for using the select board, using the town government as much as legally can be used to advocate for a net zero stretch code at the state level. And if those things are, it's not explicitly stated, and I would love to see a little bit of a tweak to the language there, because it is quite possibly the most important item in the plan, and the more explicit that it can be, the less people can wiggle out of a commitment to supporting it. So I'd like that to be beefed up. The other thing that I would say is I'd also love for there to be more explicit language in there somewhere, that there's going to be a specific percentage of the electric of the bus fleet be electric by 2030, at least 45%, since we know we have to reduce emissions 45% by 2030. So if you could have that explicitly stated in there, I know that this is a document where you have to get everybody on board, and you know, people don't like making commitments, but like, we've got to make some commitments. We've got 10 years. It's not enough time for this stuff to go like gently. And so I think that those two things, I think, could be examined and tweaked a little bit, just for a little bit more strength. I do see that there were some changes made there from the previous draft, but I would like it to be even more explicit. And the last thing I'll say is that I'd love to see moving forward in response to your moving forward topic, and I love the idea that you want to engage with community groups more often. I would say, instead of having us come and tell you what we want you to do, I would love to see it happen the other way as well. We have, you know, a database with a lot of engaged people, you know, a lot of engaged residents in town. So if you want to see home energy assessments, you know, go from whatever the percentage was, I think you said like 10% or something, to like, we can help you do that. And so I'd love to see more shooting things our way. If you have a public education campaign and you want doors knocked, phones rung, like, that's what a community group can do. So I'd love to see that be a two-way dialogue. So that's my point.
Okay, that's a really good point about the two-way dialogue. Excellent. Pamela Dritt, do you want to make a public comment?
Yes, please. I second everything Laura said just now. We're building a new middle school. I've been to various meetings on that. There's a commitment to be green. They don't know what that means. They think elite certification is enough. They're not talking, I don't think, about net zero, and we need to. We can't have any more new construction that isn't net zero. Can you not? I mean, nobody disagrees with that, do they?
So I think I'm going to send you the summary document that the middle school committee did when they were concluding, because they've paused that committee for a while. They are focused on a net zero building, and I think that update will give you a lot of understanding on where that project is. But that's again, CAAB isn't running that. There's another committee that is running that, and Kate is on that committee. But I'll send you that document to get you updated. Any other comments, Pam? Okay, thank you. The only other public member is Andy. Would you like to?
Yes, I'm a Concord resident. I'm really interested in just finding out what the town's doing for climate action. So that's what I've been looking. And I know the document's a draft, but would it be possible to get that or get on a distribution list, or how do you normally handle that?
It's available on the town website. If you go to the sustainability division, there is a climate action and resiliency plan page that will give you all the details about this project, including a link that says review the plan here, and you'll get to see the latest draft. And you can also give feedback through a link there as well.
Thank you.
I don't see any other members of the public. And we've had a nice long meeting. This has been good. I want to thank you all, and I want to see if there's a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Brian. It was a good meeting, and I would move to adjourn.
Great, thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Great. If we could all raise our hands on the videos to show that we agree. Excellent. All right. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
all.